everyone. I've been really looking forward to sharing the next serrata hack because I believe that the topic that I'm going to talk about is one that not many of us really take into consideration when we are fitting our equipment to our horses. So I'm going to share a little story about how it is that I came to fall upon this awareness that I had with my horse, Ginobra. So I was riding Ginobra and everything was going really well. I was riding him in a basic two-piece snaffle bit. And every once in a while I would notice that I could hear Ginobra picking up the bit, working the bit, and every once in a while it would kind of clank into his teeth. And I didn't think too much of it because he wasn't anxiously chomping at the bit. Rather, he was just working the bit quietly, and I could hear him lift that bit and it would kind of clank into his teeth. Well, then what started to happen was I started to notice every once in a while after one of those clanks, Ginobra started to get a little nervous and a little anxious. And that happened on more than one occasion, and I couldn't figure it out. I kept saying to myself, Jill, are your hands hard? Do you have a backwards acting hand? You know, I ran through the reel in my head, and every time I would check myself, no, it's happening even when I have a slightly draped rein. So when I was done riding, I brought Ginobra into the grooming bay, and like always, when I take his bridle off, he loves for me to get a towel and wipe his muzzle off and wipe his eyes and wipe behind his ears. It's kind of our ritual, and he really looks forward to it. And for whatever reason, I grabbed the corner of his mouth and I flipped the inside of his cheek inside out, and lo and behold, on the inside of his cheek, there was a little blood blister. And then I rolled the cheek back on the other side, and he had a little pinch mark there as well. And I totally had a mommy freak out moment because oh my goodness, this bit has been pinching the inside cheeks of my horse's mouth. He's never going to trust my hands. No wonder he has these moments of anxiety. And I just felt so badly about it. However, I tried to take a situation that created a lot of angst in me to find a way to educate myself about what was truly happening inside of Ginobra's mouth. So it sent me on a quest. So I'd like to share with you some of the things that I have learned throughout the last couple years and how I have come to remedy that very situation with my work with Ginobra and some other horses in my barn. But I encourage you all to look at your horse's mouths after you're done riding. You know, if you ride in a bitless bridle, it isn't so much of a concern or a bozal. But if you do ride in a snaffle bit or any variation of bit, I highly encourage you to roll back the cheek and to look inside to see if there are any little pinch marks, okay? So what I have is I brought a skull with me down here to the beautiful river near Serrata Ranch, and we're going to go through some basic oral anatomy. So many of you have taken my functional anatomy class, and we talk all about functional anatomy in the whole body, but we don't really spend much time looking at the oral anatomy. I go into that much more in depth in my relaxation course, but I don't have the opportunity to teach that course as often as I actually teach my functional anatomy class. So I'm going to grab a skull here, and we're going to start looking at some oral anatomy. And we're going to look at what was actually causing the pinching in Ginobra's mouth. Now, when I mention the pinching in his mouth, I'm not talking about just these commissures of the mouth, the part that we can see. Sometimes you'll see horses that have been ridden with a rough hand and they'll be chafed in the corners of their mouth. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you take the commissure of your lip and you roll it back, it's on the inside. precisely where you might bite your own cheek when you're eating food. And we all know how painful that is when we bite our cheek. I can't imagine that it would be any different for our horses. Okay? So let's first take a look at some oral anatomy. So here I have the entire skull of the horse. But for the sake of teaching, I'm going to remove the lower jaw and mandible, and we're going to look at the upper portion of the horse's skull. So the first thing that I would like to bring your attention to is this structure in the horse's mouth. Now this is the horse's palate. And I could teach a whole serrator review on the palate alone. But for the sake of this hack, I just want to bring your attention to the fact that this is your horse's palate. Now, you'll notice that there are a bunch of teeth in the horse's head, just like us. So let's look at the teeth, because I need to outline the teeth so that we can understand what was actually happening inside of Ginobre's oral cavity that led to the pinching of his cheeks. First of all, I want to show you the front teeth. The front teeth on the horse are called the horse's incisors. And you can count that there are 6 incisors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And horses have 6 incisors on the top, and they have 6 incisors on the bottom. Now, if I turn this skull to the side, you're going to see that there's a little snaggle tooth right here. Well, that snaggle tooth is actually what's referred to as a canine tooth. So I know that this skull actually is of a male horse. Now, some mares will also have canine teeth, but they will be very small in comparison to a male's canine teeth. And male horses have canine teeth like the incisors on the top as well as on the bottom. Now when we move back, we have another set of teeth. These are called the molars. Now if you look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are also 6 molars. The first 3 molars are called the premolars, and then you have the permanent molars. And sometimes these molars are simply what's referred to as the cheek teeth, okay? So we have our molars, we have our canine tooth, and we have our incisors. Now some of you may have also heard of wolf teeth. And wolf teeth are these tiny little deciduous teeth that tend to be found right in front of the premolar. And that is why we want to remove the wolf teeth, because if the horse plays with the bit, he can knock one of those wolf teeth, and that causes the horse distress. So the wolf teeth can also be found in the upper part of the jaw or the lower part of the jaw, okay? So I'm going to assemble my skull again and take another lateral look at it. So again, we have our cheek teeth, we have our canines, and we have our incisors. And you'll notice that there is a space between the incisors and the molars where only the canine teeth are, but there's an area where there are no teeth at all. And that is what we refer to as the bars of your horse's mouth. Now, we just looked at the bony structure of the skull, and we did a very quick look at the horse's teeth. In the living horse, of course, we have a tongue. And in the living horse, we have soft tissue that covers the palate. So anytime you go to look for a bit to fit your horse, you want to take into consideration the thickness of your horse's tongue and the height of your horse's palate. Now, back in the day when I was a young girl, all of the riding, teachers taught me that A thicker snaffle bit is a more gentle snaffle bit. But that's not necessarily true, because what we've learned, as we study horse anatomy more, is that if your horse has a low palate and a very thick tongue, when you put a thick bit in their mouth, it's like having a gag on. So we really want to take into consideration the height of the palate and the thickness of the tongue when we're actually picking a diameter of the bit for that individual horse. So that's the first thing I want you to take into consideration. Now let's talk about what Ginobili was doing. So what Ginobili was doing was he was gently playing with his bit. But as he sucked that bit up, what he was doing, because he has a very fleshy mouth, he has a lot of skin around his muzzle and on the inside of his mouth. What he was doing is he was lifting that bit and he was trapping that soft tissue in between the first premolars. And as he pinched himself, that was what was creating the little bit of blood blister in his mouth. So as I was searching through anatomy books and dentistry books, I came to learn that that is not an unusual thing. It's just that many of us riders don't ever think to look inside of our horses' mouths. So what they did to remedy that situation is, maybe some of you have heard of bit seats, where the dentist will come in and they will round the edges of the premolars so that when the horse picks up the bit, he does not pinch the soft tissue. Well, I thought, well, that isn't such a bad remedy for the situation. However, if you start removing teeth or parts of teeth, what you risk doing is destabilizing those premolars. And I do not want to destabilize my mouth. So I had to search for another idea. I had to search for a type of bit that I could put in Ginobili's mouth that if he played with the bit, he wouldn't entrap the soft tissue. And that is where I stumbled across this gem of a bit. Now, this bit is what is referred to as the Rocking S bit. It was designed and developed by a household name within the horse industry by a gentleman named Mark Rashid. And it actually came or was inspired in part by an old cavalry design. You'll notice that it has these very large, round cheek pieces, both on the right and on the left. And these round cheek pieces act to support on the sides of the horse's mouth, somewhat like a bit hobble that would stop the bit from sliding too much from side to side in the mouth. It also has an independent D-ring on the side where you attach your reins. And like the Myler bits, both sides of this bit have slightly independent action. So if you have a feel on one rein, you're not bilaterally having the same effect on the opposite side. It also has a place here to attach the cheek pieces of your bridle. So it does have a tiny little bit of leverage. When you take a feel on that bit, it will draw a little bit on the crown piece behind the ears. But most of all, I want you to notice that it's a 3-piece bit with a port, which gives horses a lot of tongue relief, and it gives horses a lot of bar relief. So that when you have a feel on this bit, it does not roll the mouthpiece up into the palate of your horse. And it is intended and designed with the idea behind it that it will help horses not pinch their cheeks on the inside or the commissures. So this bit has been a lifesaver for Ginobili and his comfort, as well as many other horses in my barn. But with that being said, not all horses love this bit, right? So like shoes, sometimes you have to try a lot of bits on a horse to find the right match. There's not just one magical bit that's going to work for every horse. But this bit in general, the Rocking S bit by Mark Rashid, has certainly resolved my issue with Ginobili, so he no longer picks up the bit and pinches the insides of his cheeks. And therefore, he has now begun to be able to trust my hands again and to trust the bit and to go about his work in a relaxed fashion. Now you will also notice that this bit is made up of sweet iron, which is the material that the mouthpiece is made from, and that sweet iron can also encourage a chemical reaction within the mouth that keeps the mouth moist, okay? So the whole purpose behind this hack is to challenge you to become more aware of what's happening on the inside of your horse's mouth the next time you put a bit on. Get familiar with your horse's mouth. Does he have a high palate? Meaning when you go to feel the palate, does it feel like a cathedral ceiling? Or does it feel flat, like a flat roof? And look at that tongue. Is it a skinny tongue or is it a thick tongue? And last but not least, invest in a bit sizer. Jump on Amazon and get a bit sizer, which is essentially a piece of plastic with a flat end on it. You insert it in your horse's mouth like you would a bit, and it tells you what size of a bit that you should order for the size of your horse's mouth. So I hope this gives you a little bit of food for thought about bits and about how they fit the very individual shape of your horse's mouth. Or if you have many horses, it might be a curious thing to check all their mouths and just to recognize how radically different horses can be from one to the other. So I hope you enjoyed this hack, and until next time, be safe, be happy, and have fun with your horses.